Your Excellency, Mr. President, dear colleagues, I'm so glad to welcome you to the 13th Investment Forum titled Russia Calling. Our forum is held the 13th time in a row. It is the second online forum. You know, every cloud has a silver lining. Previously, we had 2,500 guests and more than 1,000 guests came from abroad, but last year, 3 million people streamed our forum online and 180,000 people watched us internationally, streaming us on the internet and seeing the sessions. So I believe that we will definitely have personal communication, but we will resort to the blended format. And the scope of the internet is much broader, and there is huge interest shown for our forum because President Putin has his address, and in the morning we have had a macroeconomic session with ministers speaking, the economic development minister, finance minister, and the central bank governor, and the business community attended. And, you know, the track record of our business community is a testimony of the potential of the Russian economy and the capability of the Russian economy. Like Tatiana Bakalchuk, who has many children, and on her maternal leave, she invented and set up an online store, Wildberries, and today its market cap is $13 billion. So it is a live instance of the new economy that is created with the help of the new online technologies. It is not commodity-driven anyway. It has been a success, so we have had a lively debate in the morning, but today, and now we start our main session, and the intervention of President Putin is now to follow, and afterwards we'll have the Q&A session. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Over to you. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Most importantly, I'd like to welcome all of you to the Russia Calling Forum. As a custom, it brings together domestic and international investors and experts to discuss the most relevant business agenda topics, like the key trends that define the development and the investment potential of specific areas of business, markets, and entire nations. Of course, the COVID pandemic has been in the spotlight for around 2 years, and it can't be helped. Its impact on the investment, business, and collaboration ties is huge. It has been impacting the global economy by and large, and the latter, I may note, has gradually been rebounding, but the pace of the recovery definitely once again is questionable, and the reason is well known. It's because of another resurgence of the disease caused by a new strain of the COVID. And because of that, governments worldwide once again have to resort to restrictions. In the forthcoming weeks, it's going to become clear how grave the effects of the new strain are. But it is crystal clear now that we should be prepared for whatever change it may bring. We should be tracking constantly the efficacy of tests and vaccines, use the clear-cut algorithms to reduce the spread of the disease. It's important to maintain the high alert of the healthcare systems, including the stockpiles of medicines, oxygen, and pool of beds available, and the most efficient protocols to treat the disease in place. I would ask the government to, I'm turning to my colleagues now from the federal government, to present an updated plan of action within a week, given the risks of the spread of the new strain of the coronavirus, taking into account the global transborder nature of the infection. An efficient response can be provided only in concert, and I said that on many occasions. And the UN has heard multiple calls to join hands, and we can only fight that in concert, the whole of the global community. What I mean is the mutual recognition of the vaccines and vaccination certificates, availability of vaccines for all the regions of our planet, and joint work on new drugs against COVID. Well, this is hard to challenge. and the acknowledgement of our common responsibility, especially by those leaders of major developed nations, will be the basis for more active joint action. With respect to the economic agenda, well, a characteristic of the current situation is a high inflation pressure at the juncture of a new global wave of the pandemic. You, as experts, as the direct stakeholders of the global economic activities, are well aware that the price growth is because of a number of factors overlapping. In particular, over the past time, the consumer demand for services like tourism, transport, public catering has slumped, as is known, and shifted towards goods. And the closed borders and the restrictions in place have decoupled many of the supply chains. For some of the goods and categories, we are now seeing the shortage, and that pushed the price up. Besides, another important factor in bolstering the inflation, probably the key role belongs here to the extremely lax fiscal policies of the most of the developed nations. The growth in budget deficits this year, it is the case also, well, keeps the global inflation risks quite high. They still persist. Definitely the large-scale funds injections helped and allowed to support people and the business community, and we have been doing that also here domestically. But you know, the global impact still resulted in a price hike at global markets, including the commodities. We're now seeing what turmoil has erupted in the global energy market, and that resulted in a manifold increase in the price of the nitrogen fertilizers. And for the agricultural producers worldwide, that is the backbone to maintain the soil fertility and stable crops. It's obvious that this situation is fraught with risks for further growth of foodstuff price. Over the past years, we have seen a price spike of wheat globally, and these dynamics may linger. In this country, our people also feel this global inflation pressure. In no small part, due to the external factors, the consumer prices growth has considerably been sped up. It is a formidable issue, quite sensitive for people, including and in particular low-income families, and it requires our unflagging attention. It's important not only to cope with the after-effects of the inflation, but be proactive, eliminating the inflation drivers. We have provided already targeted support to goods manufacturers with categories most subject to sharp fluctuations. Most importantly, these are foodstuffs. And once again, I'd like to draw the attention of the federal government and regional authorities that the greater output and greater food availability here would be a key performance indicator on that area of work. We also expanded the financial assistance to low-income people. This year, we made a one-off disbursement to pensioners and families with school children. We're launching new measures to back families with children. Next year, we will additionally index the minimum subsistence and the minimum wage and social allowances. The decisions have been already made. Definitely, this is not an exhaustive list to support our people. Depending on our financial capabilities, we'll contemplate other measures in this respect. And definitely, we should remain macroeconomically prudent. Let me note that Russia has been the first out of the major economies to have normalized its fiscal policy amid the epidemic. Starting with next year, we will be rigorously abiding by the fiscal rule in drafting and exercising the federal budget. All the measures to support our people fit into the budget parameters well enough, and they are implemented with the help of additional fiscal revenues and redistribution of expenditure. Hence, they don't have inflation implications. In monetary policy, the Bank of Russia has been pursuing inflation curbing, and timely and effective banking regulation. Thanks to the responsible, well-conceived action by the government and the business community, our economy has already surpassed the pre-crisis levels. The GDP grew by 4.6 in January to September. As a result of the year, it's going to increase by 4.2% year-on-year. The level of unemployment in September went down to 4.3%. And this is the pre-pandemic parameters. And today we can say with affirm that the labor market in this country has fully recovered. And it's noteworthy this is not the case in all major economies.
Our strategic task is to support and reinforce the positive trends in the Russian economy, to ensure its sustained long-term development, or, as the experts put it, to speed up the potential economic growth rate. The epidemic taught us, amid global challenges and given the natural competitive advantages of Russia, how to identify areas of growth for investment. It's a matter of principles for us for such investments to produce a multiplier effect for national economic sectors and the regions of the country, primarily to drive incomes and standards of living up. It's worth noting key areas here. First, our long-term priority is the increase of the share of infrastructure investments in the GDP. We have launched a powerful instrument for the territorial development. I'm referring to infrastructure budget-funded credits. Interest rate, 3%. Credit length, 15 years. This is a pretty decent conditions for our economy, and over the next 2 years, an additional effort will be made to execute projects through this tool. The scope of such effort will be to the tune of 500 billion rubles. This will be spent on construction of highways, grid networks, communication systems, things that make the people-friendly environment, that allow to create jobs, to put online new production capacities and launch promising projects. Projects that are efficient beyond the economic profitability, but that bring great contributions for the environment and create opportunities for a fulfilling life for our citizens. Program of infrastructure budget-funded credits will be extended at least until 2026. Its final scale will be defined later as we glean more experience and assess the maturity of our projects. And clearly, the technological and productive capacities of our construction sector will be dynamically increased as well. We will create clear and simple procedures to build quickly, reliably, with great quality, without bloating costs and hindrances. There's one other core decision here. Up until 2024, the National Wealth Fund will spend 2.5 trillion rubles. These funds are meant to be repaid, and they will be invested into the major investment projects, primarily the infrastructure investment. And granted, it will enable attracting new private investments. At least we very much expect to get this result. Second, we support investments that drive positive social and ecological environmental impact for the country, that are in line with the sustainable development goals that Russia has set. We already have a legal framework for the quote-unquote green projects that will help us to significantly decrease the pollutant emissions. Starting July 1 next year, we will have it all set in Russia to launch climate business initiatives, including foreign ones. They are of prime importance for reaching the goal of carbon neutrality for 2060, and we've mentioned this in Glasgow, among other fora. New program for increasing the energy efficiency of the economy has an important role to play. The government must finalize its preparations by October 1, 2022. We will be developing infrastructure of investments into sustainable development and encourage private participation in the effort. I instruct the government, together with the Bank of Russia, and I ask the business community to play along, to come up with a lineup of financial tools for meeting this goal. Those include tax benefits, subsidies, state guarantees for companies and investors alike. A number of projects actually already enjoy such support and are being executed. And I reiterate that it's crucial that that would be a systemic effort. Third, development of the national economy, growth of labor productivity and income growth must be driven by the digital transformation, by employment of new technology across the walks of life and domains. Russia is already one of the global leaders in terms of usage of digital services and AI technology. Having said that, we fully understand that it's crucial to ensure balanced development of digital ecosystems, to define the role of financial institutions. Let me remind you that such ecosystems are built around an individual, around the so-called quote-unquote digital profile. And I've recently underscored this point at an international conference on artificial intelligence. It's critical that we identify the right model for handling big data, big arrays of personal data. It must be undergirded by an unconditional safety and security of personal data and, looking more broadly, of rights and freedoms of our citizens. Fourth, what else will play an important role in the recovery of Russian economy and its long-term growth? It's the banking sector and the stock market. Thanks to the solid financial standing, Russian banks are boosting lending, and our host can probably corroborate this. I believe it's been mentioned time and again today. It is critical that going forward we increase the availability of leverage funds for the sustainable, growing companies and organizations that attract money to develop productive capacity to create new highly paid jobs. At that, banks should definitely assess the credit quality of lenders, regardless of their form of ownership. Besides, given the fundamentals, Russian stock market indices have exceeded the pre-pandemic levels. The stock offering and bond issues of domestic companies are up. We will make our exchanges even more attractive, including for foreign investors. And I want to add that the stock market is getting increasingly more accessible for small and medium businesses. This year, the volume of bond issues by such companies stood at 7.6 billion rubles. We intend to develop this tool and to support small and medium businesses to offer new solutions. So, for instance, small and medium companies now have banking fees and charges reimbursed as they sell goods and services to physical persons, to individuals. Such procedure is accommodating for businesses and profitable for consumers. I believe it should be extended by at least half a year, and it is currently will be operational until the end of this year. And another important topic, Russian stock market is getting increasingly popular with individual investors. Over the 9 months, their investments grew by a quarter, which provides great robustness to the stock market and makes it more attractive. This resource must drive the investment of appropriate projects, but it also should help the citizens themselves. It should be a source of stable income for those who want to play the long game and invest money in the Russian economy. And so I instruct the government to present new proposals on this regard, including tax credits for individuals who invest long-term in the Russian companies, and we must think about a co-financing or match financing for such savings. We need to find a way to guarantee the protection of such investments. I must stress, stock market is inherently susceptible to market swings. They go up and they go down, and we need to protect the interests of our citizens, to protect their savings. In fact, we're talking about a similar mechanism to the bank deposit insurance, and I ask to look carefully into this mechanism. After all, we have much of the ground covered, and in this I want to wrap up my introductory remarks, and with much pleasure I will hear your thoughts and insights and proposals on on your comments on how you working in Russia, what challenges and obstacles do you see, what would you want us to draw attention to, and what would you advise us to do? We always heed to your recommendations. Thank you, Mr. President. Today, we have plenty of investors online. They represent a variety of regions: United States, Great Britain, Europe, Asia, Middle East, and beyond. And first, I want to ask the Qatar Investment Authority, represented by Mansour bin Ebrahim Al Mahmoud. This is a major investor. Last year, it bought $500 billion worth stock of VTB, and it's a major investor into the Russian economy. And now we are currently waiting for the government commission decision on the next deal. It will be buying a significant stake at the Western Speed Diameter, which is a toll highway in St. Petersburg. So they are investing heavily in St. Petersburg. So I give the floor to Mr. Al Mahmoud.
Thank you, President Putin. Thank you, Chairman Kosten. My name is Mansour Al Mahmoud, the CEO of QIA. Mr. President, we have been very active investing in Russian economy and in a range of different industries: banking, retail, energy, and so on. I have a very simple question, Mr. President, for you. Given all the current geopolitical challenges facing the world, from COVID to climate change, or from sanction to bilateral relation, I would like to ask you, what are the issues that keep you awake at night? And from your experience, what are the best ways to address them and to ensure Russian continued economy prosperity? Thank you.
I tried to mention that in my introductory remarks. Anyway, indeed, the Russian Federation has been faced with the same problems and challenges as the rest of the world: the climate change, the COVID pandemic that has an impact on the economic activities and well, reduces our potential for free travel and offline meeting, and it is fraught with inflation and other things, and I mentioned that. But still we have been able to work effectively to be able to accomplish the pre-pandemic macroeconomic indicators in our country. And one of these is the reduction in unemployment down to 4.3%. Well, even in the pre-pandemic times, we had it slightly higher, 4.7%, and now it's 4.3%. And economic growth as a result of the year will be 4.7% of the GDP, and we are fully aware of that. It's not the highest pace of growth in the world, but for us it is a good indicator. And we try to do everything, all our measures are macroeconomically prudent. And what is necessary is to make timely decisions, analyze what already was done, and building on that, make future plans. That does not mean that we only think of how, like, kind of to carry on with the tick box exercise. We know that it all has a toll on people. All the challenges of today impact them, so we try to make the well-conceived decisions to support our economy, those sectors that suffered most and bore the brunt, as well as our people, especially those income rungs that need our support, like the pensioners, the elderly, the families with children. And we have made a decision, as I have said, to index the minimum wage and the minimum subsistence level. That will definitely result in a recalculation of a number of allowances that are based on these parameters, and definitely we are not oblivious with our routines about aiming high in terms of strategic development, and definitely want to transform our economy so that it goes digital. We want to attract the necessary volumes of investments. We invest our own domestic public money in infrastructure, and we expect the investors to appreciate our efforts and lend us their confidence, and will co-invest together with us, as our Qatar friends do. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Who is next, colleagues? Just be agile, be active. Who is next? Good day, my name is Oleg Kuzmin from Forum Management, London. Thank you very much for the opportunity to partake in the discussion. My question would be, if we go back slightly, back to the early 90s, the economy grew at a rapid pace, and the economy was stabilized, and new institutional framework was put in place. In the next 10 to 12 years, Russia faced different externalities and shocks like the slump in oil price, the financial crisis, the sanctions, and epidemiological crisis, which is currently the case. But anyway, the Russian Federation has been able to increase the resilience of its economy, and currently the international investors and bond and debt investors are starting to speak of an EM economic fortress which Russian Federation has built. You have outlined important areas of work for future, but anyway, my question in this regard would be the following. What is seen by you as the main overarching priority for Russia's socio-economic development in the forthcoming 10 years? The balance of payments in the public finance are in good shape, and you have the mechanisms to reduce the impact of the external shocks and assuaging the external shocks. You have the inflation targeting and the fiscal rule. Anyway, the fortress is already in place. What comes next? Well, our colleague from Qatar that has just asked the question asked me what prevents me from sleeping at night. What concerns me most? You know, I must say that we have our domestic problems typical of our country, mostly related to the demographics. We had two natural declines during the Second World War, or the Great Patriotic War, as we called it, in 1943, 1944, and another slump happened in mid-1990s after the collapse of the USSR. They were around tantamount and equal birth rate slumps. 1.2 million was the lowest level. In 2006, we had around 1.9 new babies born per annum. So, and this problem, this issue, has become systemic, and it has an economic perspective because of the shortage of the manpower. And we have around 80 million of working age people, and the losses of hours are 1.2% per annum. I mean, the manpower. And from the perspective of humanitarian considerations, and in order to strengthen our statehood, and judging on the economic foundations, we should resolve the demographics. We should handle it. I will not enumerate all the range of tools, all the toolkit that we will apply to resolve that in the future. But I want to tell you that in recent future we have been able to get things going, and we definitely are capable of that. We know that. Unfortunately, this horrible infection has increased the number of letalities, and that has a toll on the demographics. So those natural declines back in 1943 and 44 and 1990s happened, and we overcame them, and now we have to overcome this also. And the investment attraction also is another important area of work, and we should move towards an end-to-end digitalization of our economy in public governance and in the economy. You said that we are now an economic fortress, an EM economic fortress. If they say so, it is good, but we don't want to build fortresses and live behind the fences and walls. We just want to enhance our sovereignty, including our economic sovereignty, which will be our aspiration in future, but that we want to attain and accomplish not in prejudice of our cooperation with partners worldwide, if they want and where they want so. So next question, thank you.
Gira Chamorro from Pictet Asset Management, and it's a pleasure to be here in this forum. As investors, analyzing the macro fundamentals of the Russian economy, such as growth, inflation, and debt levels, is no longer enough. Our clients are now asking us to also incorporate environmental, social, and governance issues when assessing the risk of investing in Russia. Mr. President, what message would you like to convey to the international community that may want to continue investing in Russia, but must also implement and assess sustainability? And besides some of the measures on the environmental side, as you mentioned, carbon neutrality by 2060, are there any specific government policies that you would like to highlight that may improve Russia's ESG profile going forward? Thank you.
Your Excellency, dear colleague, we are aware what the trends of the global development are and what the baseline criteria today for the investment flows are. And the ESG parameter, which is an aggregated indicator, a comprehensive one, a complex one, it demonstrates what the strategy of a country in its development in the mid to long run is, and it should be people-centric, human-centric, and the Russian Federation is aware of that because we want to follow this global trend, and we build our policy around our people. We try to do so. We're not always successful, but anyway, this is our resolve and our determination, which means that the healthcare level and quality should go up, and we should care for the natural environment. If we speak about the carbon neutrality and attaining that by 2060, that means that we will be consistent in moving towards that goal step by step. You know, it may be quite a modest goal. Many countries are more ambitious, much more ambitious, but I can say that probably we can attain that within a shorter timeline if we go as planned. And definitely we have a toolkit in place in order to reduce the carbon intensity of our economy and use the sinking capacity of our forests and ecosystems to a greater extent. And we should fight the forest fires better. We should plant new forests if eliminated and when were eliminated. And definitely all these things, including modernizing our economy and going digital in a bundle, all of that allows us to speak that we fully support the sustainable development criteria by the United Nations, and we are an active participant of working with other countries on that. And I am confident that our investors will see that. And if they participate in our efforts, they will be also following the trend of today. So, well, developing alternative energy sources and hydrogen will be something that the humanity expects all of us to do. I mean, the authorities of major economies and the investors that participate in the global economic development. So we speak one and the same language, and we can very well understand each other. But, Mr. President, may I ask a personal question on the same topic? Like yesterday, the Soviet Russia newspaper made public a study by Credit Suisse, a Swiss bank. And the insight was as follows: there are some there are enterprises, economic actors, and the people, individuals. And to fit into the 2.9 tons, which is the norm of the Paris Agreement, and people should abandon meat, coffee, beer, and they can practice sports and go to gym only 3 times a week and fly only once a year. And the personal hygiene is the biggest problem. You can take a shower only thrice a week, 8 minutes, and you can flush the toilet only 2 times a week. And the washing machine and the dishwashing machine can only operate 2 times a week. And in this context, we will be able to fit in the norms. Do you like this? And would you like to live in such a world? I would like to live in such a world where the personal hygiene items would not be detrimental to the environment. I wish us to have the planes that would not be polluting the atmosphere. If we take any foodstuffs, they should be properly recycled and utilized afterwards. We can attain and accomplish anything if we approach these things in a balanced way, not a formalistic way, and we should not try to justify that we cannot attain something. We should strive for good results. And definitely, probably, heads of state should be allowed to produce like 6 to 8 tons of CO2 per annum, given their professional duties. Next. East Capital, Jakub Ganbesa. Mr. President, you mentioned on many occasions the red lines in the relationship between Russia and Ukraine that has a bearing on the West and NATO. Could you specify where these red lines for Ukraine are, and what after effects may follow, and what repercussions may follow if the red lines are crossed, and should investors be afraid about the possible entry of Russian forces in Ukraine? Possible entry of Russia's forces in Ukraine, that was the talk early this year when we had the military maneuvers West 21, but nothing happened, as you see. So it is not about entry of forces or waging a war, no. We should establish a relationship and a more sound development. We should definitely the security interests of all the international parties and stakeholders must be taken into account. If we work in this direction, there will be no fears and no threats. I believe that. If we talk about the threats, the residents of the 2 unrecognized republics, the Lugansk and Donetsk People's Republics, they also and often suffer from threats of the movement of troops and forces along their borders, and the Russian Federation, apart from that, has some concerns, seeing large-scale, unannounced previously maneuvers by alien forces next to its borders, like in the Black Sea recently, 20 kilometers away off our borders. The strategic bombers passed by carrying high-precision weapons, and they may carry nuclear weapons. Definitely, we would regard it as a threat to us. Now, with respect to the red lines, they are, theoretical, more or less, to a large extent. Let's look what happened in the previous 20 years. The relationship between the Russian Federation and the collective West back in 1990s and early 2000s were cloudless. Why was expand NATO itching closer to our borders? Why was that done? Who can respond? There can be no sound response to that. We had a perfect picture of our relations. Back in the 1990s, we were nearly allies, and despite our warnings and requests that followed later, the military infrastructure approached our borders, Now in Poland and Romania, they have the missile defense systems stationed, and the launchers, their Mk-41 launchers, can be equipped with Tomahawk, which are assault or strike assets, which is a threat for us. It's obvious. And the response to all our requests not to do that, what happened what we're seeing now. And we had, in this context, to pursue the development and design of the hypersonic weapons. That was our response to our partners' withdrawal from the ABM and INF treaties. And now you'll ask the question about Ukraine and about the red lines. The red lines, well, they would be probably the threats emanating from that territory onto us. If they continue in this vein, well, I said about that on many occasions. Probably you haven't been following my statements. You've been doing business. But, I reiterate, if they station and deploy attack systems on Ukrainian soil, the flight time to our borders to Moscow would be like 5 to 7 minutes, because the East capital, Moscow. So you are stationed in Moscow. I've been in Moscow for 15 years. So the time to target would be quite short, and we will have to respond with something similar against those who are menacing us. And we can do that. We're capable. We have tested a new sea-based hypersonic missile with 9M speed, and the time to target will also be 5 minutes. So those who give these orders should probably think of that. And these threats and menaces are the red lines for us. And I hope we will not go that far, and that the common sense and the responsibility may prevail. And
regrettably, this information plans actually have quite an impact on the market. I mean, all of the markets can confirm that this disinformation campaign caused an 11% stock market drop. So, well, it might be a planted leak, it might be a pleak or something like this. Okay, quite possible. Next question, please.
Hello, Oliver Weeks from Brevin Howard in London. Mr. President, since you returned to the presidency, we've seen in Russia stagnation of real household incomes, rising inequality, and you've had to apply more and more open political repression. If you plan to stay as president after cancelling term limits, do you think that less austere fiscal policy might be a better way to preserve your support? Thank you.
Что касается начала президентства и падающих доходов.
Now, first to household incomes and the presidency. It's true that due to the pandemic, there is an income drop. Nothing new, nothing unique about it. It happens in all the countries. Now, if you look at the broader picture, starting from the start of my presidency, we had 40 million people living beyond the poverty line. Now, we still have a lot of people beyond poverty line, but it's 20 million people now. So the amount of them halved. And the household incomes have also grown. And it's a pretty much well-known thing. There is such thing as food inflation, which is on the rise in our country, as in many other countries, which drives the decrease of household incomes. To counter that, we pursue a tailor-made policy. We try to support the economy. We try to support the decent amount of decent wages to get paid decently. We provide targeted support to vulnerable groups that require state support. And primarily, and I mentioned this before, as the senior citizens, it's the families with children. I will spare you the details of all the measures, but I'll give you an example. We are even supporting expecting mothers. So not even though the families with children, but women who are actually pregnant at the moment. And we are extending this support to families with children of up to 16 years old, to single-parent families. We will make it an end-to-end, a wall-to-wall effort. Over the first 9 months of this year, the actual disposable household incomes are actually growing. We are monitoring the situation carefully, and we do understand that it depends on the breakup of the statistics. We know that the food inflation affects certain population groups. We know that the food inflation is probably higher, it stands at about 10%. It's higher than the overall inflation, and it is a major factor for certain groups. We look into how the state can support these people, and we pursue a line on improving the situation in general. So your question was a twofold. First of political/economical. Is it better to have a more lax monetary policy? I'll put it like this. You are well aware that certain countries, and you know it full well, pursued quite a lax policy. So what was the result? The result was the spike of inflation. So it prompts the following conclusion, I guess. We look at the basic pillars of Russia's development. We look at the fundamentals, the macroeconomic situation. We carefully track it and fine-tune our policy accordingly, which is why Russian government and central bank, and I truly believe this, are making timely decisions to curb inflation. Having said that, we are spending the national reserves to spur the national development, and first and foremost, it relates to infrastructure development. Ports, airports, railroads, highways, it's the utilities systems. So this is the backbone of the economy, which will serve as a solid foundation to make the standards of living grow. I think that would be the consequence of our work going forward. And I think it's a crucial thing for investors that we are not populists. We will not print easy money. We will not pump the economy with helicopter money without thinking about tomorrow. Thank you. Colleagues, let's move on now.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Honorable Koning and Nieuwe Burman. We have several hundred of million invested in your country, in companies and governments, bonds. I would like to ask you a question around your direction of going digital. I know Russia is doing a great job of cracking down on cyber hacker groups, but there seem to be still a significant number of attacks that are serious, that are coming out of the Russian territory. What is the main challenge preventing you from putting an end to these? Thank you.
Dear Rob, what is the main challenge preventing us from putting an end to these cyber attacks? Well, the number of these attacks that come from the Russian territory is significantly fewer than those attacks that coming from other countries. As international observers put it, it's not something that Russian statistics has to say, it's international statistics. It's the US domain space where the most of cyber attacks come from. So what's the main challenge? Well, you know, it's hundreds of people who write the laws, and it's hundreds of millions of people who think how to bypass them. So the reality is such that there is temptation for people with certain skills and competencies to try to sidestep this laws, and sometimes governments have to play catch-up with them. Just like as is the case with the pandemic, fighting cybercrime takes a collective effort. We've mentioned time and again that we've offered our international partners and to you US counterparts as well, even during the last period of President Obama's tenure, to work together. First, they showed some result in this, but then they had other things on their plate. We offered this to President Trump. We offered this to President Biden when we spoke in Geneva, and we actually agreed that we will start this work in earnest. And actually, the working groups are already operational, the experts are already talking to each other, and I hope it will bring about great results both for Russia and the United States. And it will give a decent momentum, not just bilaterally, but under the United Nations aegis as well. This is something we are earnestly interested in, because the number of attacks against Russian resources is not going down. In fact, it went up over the first 9 months of this year. I don't quite remember the percentage figures, but there was a significant year-on-year increase. That is to say, we fully understand the significance of this joint effort, and we will pursue it. Well, I've been listed in several American lists. One of them is actually related to cyber attacks. So, turns out I'm a hacker. I've never known how to do these things, but according to the US experts, I'm one of those bad guys. So I guess I'm a latent hacker. I even, having troubles handling my smartphone, and there you go. Next, please, colleagues. Who's next?
Hello, Mr. President. This is Richard from Cathay Life, and we are active investors in the Russian sovereign bonds. And thank you for this rare opportunity. I'd like to ask about Russia's fiscal policies, as we are seeing lots of energy exporting countries preparing for the post-oil era. And currently, 30% of the federal government's revenue comes from the oil and gas sector. So what is Russia's long-term fiscal plan and to navigate this kind of situation? Thank you.
Well,
it's a traditional question that we get. It is true that oil and gas revenue stands for a significant share of the state incomes. But I want to underscore that the share is gradually going down, year in and year out, with the simultaneous growth of non-ONG revenue. And it's indeed one of the key drivers of national development for us. It's the diversification of the economy. We will intend to follow this track, to plan for the post-oil era. But let me stress this, the population of the planet is growing, and it will continue to grow. The economy, the global economy is growing, and it will continue to grow. The energy demands, guess what, are growing. And the demand for energy will be higher than it is today. So it is difficult to forecast and foretell how the structure of the global energy mix will look like in several years. Assessments vary. International Energy Agency, for instance, believes that over the next 20 to 30 years, the global energy mix will only change slightly. And there will be no complete phasing out of the fossil fuels. So the assessments vary. So we bear these arguments in mind. And it's our basic premise that our deposits of hydrocarbons, including oil, might be used for a variety of needs, not just for the fuel sector, but also for the chemical industry, the petrochemical industry, which will also bring more incomes into the state coffers. Then the existing oil and gas infrastructure can be used for hydrogen supplies. For instance, it can be used to supply green hydrogen. It is more expensive than the regular thing, regular hydrogen, but it is a promising area for the energy development of Russia. And let's look at gas, for instance, at natural gas. It's one of the cleanest of the fossil fuels, if I can venture to say this. So natural gas supplies will continue to grow, given that the natural gas production among our key partners in Europe is dropping. I think they had 24% production drop last year, while the energy demand is ever growing. So we will look into other areas of energy sector. We will develop solar and wind. We will develop alternative fuels. We are making an effort in this regard, and we're paying quite a lot of attention to this, and the share of these alternative fuels is growing every year. Even as we speak, Russia's economy is one of the greenest in the world. Look at the hydro power, look at nuclear, look at renewables. Their share stands at 40%. If you factor in gas, natural gas, it stands at 86%. I think there will be quite a few countries, perhaps a couple or maybe 3 or 4 countries can outstrip us in this. Others lag behind. And I think this is a competitive advantage too. It allows us to think ahead and to plan for the future. So I think we will have plenty of things to work on, including with our foreign friends, partners, and investors. Thank you. Next question, please. Where do we move now? From Taipei.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is Mehek Bhatia from Wellington Asset Management, based out of Boston. My question is regarding the security situation in the Middle East, especially in light of what happened in Afghanistan this year. I would like to ask you how you see Russia's role in the security situation in the Middle East. And here I ask not just about its political future, but also about the economic future. And related to that, do you see over the next few years that Russia and China can work together in the Middle East towards the economic future of the Middle East? Thank you.
Well, I'll start with the security situation in the Middle East. Middle East is the region of peace. It's a region with which we are traditionally partnering up with on very amicable terms. Our relationship with many countries of this region are growing ever more pragmatic, efficient, and amicable. What underpins this success? I think it's the success of our foreign policy, of our foreign policy pillars. It's the respect towards our partners, to their culture, to their religion, to their traditions, and complete non-interference in the internal affairs. We look for points of convergence in terms of economy. And as we seek greater economic prosperity, we can mutually reinforce one another. So let us go back in time. I think 10 years ago, was it? All the quote-unquote civilized world was rising in applause to the Arab Spring. So what about this Arab Spring now? it brought about nothing but tragedy, human tragedy. Why it happened? Because external parties tried to exploit the domestic difficulties to unsettle the situation. They tried to use their cookie-cutter solutions to impose it on different countries, and the same attempt was made in Afghanistan. And we all know how it ended. So, from the one hand, we hear our partners saying, yes, we made a mistake, we shouldn't do the same mistake again, and yet they continue to do just that in other regions and countries. The situation in Afghanistan is indeed dire, but I believe that this is a case of lessons unlearned. I won't give you the names of my colleagues, but who in private told me that yes, we made a mistake, we've overstretched ourselves. But it happens time and again in other Middle Eastern countries, in Africa and beyond. Which brings me to believe that our basic principle must be different. Our basic assumption should be respect toward our partners. And when I say we, I mean it's not a Russia we. I mean the international community. If the international community follows these principles, we will succeed. But this will be a challenging process. It takes time, but just no other way to settle long-term crises, to secure development. Turning to Afghanistan now. When I was speaking about Middle East in general, it applies to Afghanistan proper. The situation is very complicated there. I think it's not the appropriate place or time to give our assessments to Taliban, but we should say that Taliban controls the situation in the country. We need to help them at least to unblock the assets in the foreign accounts. We should give people an opportunity to deal with the most pressing challenges, to address the humanitarian needs, to buy medical equipment, to buy medicine. We need to provide them support to help children in need. So these funds will not be diverted to buy weapons. I mean, after all, do they need more weapons? They have plenty of weapons left there for billions and billions of dollars of worth of weapons. So let's just think step ahead. Now, turning to our cooperation with China, we are cooperating across many tracks with our Chinese partners, and one of them is the work in third countries, and this is an effort in progress. And why is this so successful? Because we share the proximity of approaches, we support one another, we support the efforts and endeavors by our Chinese partners waged under the aegis of One Belt, One Road initiatives. We are fully supportive of that, and let me stress this. China is the biggest investor in the Middle East right now.
So, definitely we welcome the efforts by the PRC. They benefit the regional development, and we'll do our utmost to provide for the security there, as we do in Syria, for example, and we will contribute to greater stability in other countries in the region. And naturally, we will find new opportunities to apply our technological capability to participate in the economic activities by those countries. And currently, we are having representatives of the nations that invest considerably in Russian economy, and definitely we produce high-tech products on Russian soil that are exported to third countries, including those countries where the investments stem from, and we make our cooperation deeper and more fruitful. We expect that to be the case in future. Thank you. Moving on. Very good day, Union Investment, Germany. Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Mr. Kostin, VTB Capital, thank you very much. The question is, there are many economic challenges facing Russia over the next 10 to 20 years, including those you have mentioned in your address, like the difficult demographics, the pandemic of the coronavirus that also has an impact, and the low productivity growth as another issue related possibly to the fact that the added value industries still have a low proportion in the economy, and the global shift away from the fossils and hydrocarbons. What does the Russian leadership view as the gravest obstacle to Russia's economic growth? And what is the strategy and timeline and how to tackle it? Well, I have already mentioned that, and you answered this question while asking. These are demographics, labor productivity, and diversification of the economy, with the help of the state-of-the-art solutions and digitalization. I will not enumerate other things related to biology, genetics, and the new leverages, but we should shift our economy to the state-of-the-art development patterns. And labor productivity, investments, and demographics. These are the pillars. And the labor productivity must be based on a new structure of the economy and a new quality. These are our overarching economic development goals. Definitely, they are human-centered, people-centered, all of them. But in order to safeguard people's interests, we should tackle these issues that you also have mentioned. But I don't see a point in enumerating all of that now, because this is part of our strategies and blueprints for the economic development. If we take demographics, well, we should support our health care and give assistance and help to families with children. If we take investments, we should remove and dismantle red tape and barriers and create a stable and favorable macroeconomic context, and we have been successful in that. Speaking about state-of-the-art economic development patterns while switching to the new industries is something that we have been closely thinking about, and we have prepared strategies and plans of actions already in place, and definitely there is an open field for work, and we are to accomplish much more than we have already had. But anyway, the interim outcomes of what we have accomplished over the past 10 to 15 years give us grounds to say that we will keep developing at a necessary pace. We would really very much like to have the pace of Russia's economic growth slightly on top of the global average, which is 3.5, and ours will be 4.7. I'm not sure whether next year we will maintain this pace of growth, but I still would like us to be above the global average. I think we are equal to that. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Moving on.
Michael Cohen from Capital Group. I'm based in London. Thank you very much, gentlemen. I wanted to ask, President Biden has recently announced his intention to run for another term. I would like to ask Mr. President, do you intend to do the same? What goals would you like to still achieve for Russia? And what do you think about the next generation of Russian leaders?
You have probably asked what else, what other goals for Russia apart from re-election. My re-election is not a goal for Russia, to achieve for Russia. Well, and the fact that President Biden recently announced his intention to run for another term has been a right thing, a proper thing to do, because starting to prepare for the elections. Well, unless you do that, the governance and the control will definitely suffer in that country. Well, the US president doesn't need my assessments, but I think he did the right thing. With respect to my plans, if you ask about my plans, you know, according to the Constitution, I do have a right to run for another term. Whether I want to do that or not, I haven't made up my mind yet, but the presence of this opportunity stabilizes our domestic political context. Similarly to the statement by President Biden that he intends to run for another term. So my right to be able to stand for another term is enough, and that suffices for now. So probably it's too early to say who plans what in 2024. What I would like to see in future is the implementation of the plans and the goals that we have set forth with respect to developing our country. And that refers to the, human resources and succession pool of ours. We have quite talented and dedicated young people, and I really want them to be quite active in politics, in economy, in business and in art. I want to see more ambitious, patriotic people, audacious enough to assume the responsibility for the country's future and seek and find new options for the country's development, and have enough might and power and be strong enough to deliver. And I think, I'm sure that this will be the future for Russia. Thank you. Moving on. A very good day, Mr. President. My name is Abdallah Marzouki. I had
Mr. President,
our office in Moscow.
The United Arab Emirates and the Russian Federation, through our various sovereign investment funds and financial institutions, have established a strong platform for co-investing. Mr. President, you mentioned high-tech products in one of your previous answers. Where else do you see the biggest investment opportunities for our two nations? Thank you.
Вы знаете, что фонд Мубадала один из наших.
You know that Mubadala Foundation is one of the time-tested and reliable partners of ours. I know that you have been working closely with Russian Direct Investment Fund, and you have been seeking for opportunities to co-invest, and you have been making decisions on automatic co-investment, and definitely what we want is to see more investments in the high-tech sphere. I will not enumerate all the subsectors, but I know, judging by Kirill Dmitriev's reports, that you work on that continuously. He is in constant touch with you and with the leadership of the UAE on a weekly basis. You invested around 10 billion, as far as I know. Is that right? The overall volume of investment is 10 billion. I mean, the platform. The platform invested.
More or less. More or less, Mr. President.
Да. Так что вот прежде всего это высокологичные.
Yes, so these are high-tech spheres primarily, and I know that you are looking at metallurgy and the energy sector, finding targets there, and we don't have any restrictions to welcome the investments from the UAE in any sectors of our economy. You have been putting out money in transport. You have good plans, and we will be supportive of anything you consider to be of interest for you and acceptable. Okay, thank you. Next.
My name is Yerlan Sizdikov. I represent Amundi Asset Management. the world's largest manager of ESG and sustainable development assets, and the largest European asset manager. Mr. President, in the recent past, Russia has been building stronger ties to China as Western sanctions intensified. As the West designated now China as a key strategic competitor, and some voices in the West are calling for so-called reverse Nixon policies towards Russia, will Russia respond and rebalance its relationship with the West and China? And what would be the conditions under which Russia could consider such a rebalancing? And Mr. President, you also mentioned the threats to Russia, Russian security. Given that China is planning to quadruple its nuclear arsenal and recently successfully tested supersonic missiles, at what point Russia will consider Chinese military buildup as a threat to its national security? Thank you.
You know, people have been trying to spook me, intimidate me with China, starting with the year 2000. Since then, you know, those who tried to spook me, they got afraid themselves, and they tried to change their policies towards China. I think these have been changed, and hence the sanctions and different restrictions, unjustified, as I believe, and running counter to the rules of international law. I mean, the sanctions against China. But, you know, it is the actual fact. The rivalry is on the rise, and sometimes it acquires, you know, an unsavory nature, like an alliance was established in the Pacific, comprising the US, the UK, and Australia. You know, when alliances against someone are established, that would not result in an improvement of regional situation. That makes it more tense. We have always advocated for a uniform security system, taking into account the interests of all the international stakeholders. But, you know, we have what we have. With respect to the increase in Chinese military power, well, it is on the rise, and everybody sees that. And their economic power, primarily, is on the rise. But why on earth do we have to be guided by third parties, third countries' interests in our policies? We will be guided by the interests of the Russian people solely. It's going to be the Russian interests that will base our policies, and at the same time, we have always treated the interests of our partners, international partners, with respect, and we appreciate similar attitude towards us, and China shows this treatment to us. Hence, with respect to the economic interaction, well, there is some subtext in your question. You are hinting whether or not we are going to taper down our kind of economic cooperation with China. In 2020, the American trade with China increased by 8%, and the Russian trade with China increased by 6.7%. So why are they calling to roll back someone to roll back relations? And they have been accelerating their ties, expanding their ties. We will be definitely guided by our own interests, and the US urges the European partners to roll back their economic cooperation with China. But you know, last year China ranked Europe's #1 trade partner ahead of the United States, which is natural. It cannot be stopped. So one should be definitely guided by these considerations, and based on that build our policies. Our trade with China keeps increasing. It was $104 billion last year, and in 2 or 3 years, we envisage around 200 billion of bilateral trade between our countries, which would be quite a fair and decent level of trade, but still far from what the US and the EU have with China. Now, with respect to the military might, you know, China is a 1.5 billion nation. 1.5 billion people reside there, so probably it has a right to plan its military policies in order to provide for the security of these people. No one can deny China that rule, that right, and definitely their military might grows alongside their economic might. This is natural. You know, the UK and France have announced that they are about to modernize their nuclear arsenals, and they are acting on these announcements. Whether that causes concerns by the United States or not, no. So then why are we to show or have any concerns with respect to the growth of the military potential of our next neighbor, with whom we have a very high, unprecedentedly high level of bilateral relations? No, we are not concerned because we keep developing our own potential and capability as well. You have mentioned it's not the supersonic way, but the hypersonic tests, and they have been successful, and we saw the reaction of our American partners, but we know that the American partners are slightly ahead with respect to the hypersonic weapons design and creation, but they're not saying that openly, you know, and no one makes any hype, and they tested the anti-satellite systems 10 years ago, and Russia did so recently, and there was a lot of outrage worldwide, but you know, everybody has a right to do so. You know, public statements is one thing, and the real situation is another thing. We will develop our relations, bilateral relations with China, as we consider appropriate. We are satisfied with the level of our relations. We believe that we can make them even deeper and more profound, and they can yield more benefits for our peoples. And definitely we think about safeguarding our own security, and we cooperate with our partners with respect to the areas that we consider important. With the United States, we consider it important to pursue the strategic stability dialogue. With the PSC, we are also in talks on that, and we have been holding regular joint military maneuvers. We exchange delegations, and definitely we have a stable relationship. We know what is happening on each other's soil, and the relations between Russia and China are an enabler of the global stability. Are you going to go to the Beijing's Olympics? You want to see the hockey or the alpine ski? Well, I plan to attend the opening ceremony.
Okay, colleagues, let's go ahead. Move ahead. Who's next?
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Maria Luisa Materrelli from Eurizon Capital in Milan. We are active investor in the government bonds market. My question is, you recently declared that the existing model of capitalism has exhausted itself. Indeed, the issue of income inequality and the need for more social justice, together with the deglobalization of supply chains, are becoming more and more important issues in the world after the pandemic, especially. How do you see Russia's role in this age of change?
In one way or another, I believe we have addressed this topic already, but I'll try to recap some of it. What is the current model? I think I've been slightly misquoted. I've been talking about the contemporary model of capitalism. So what is this model about? It is twisted somehow. It gives an upper hand to certain countries. They can use their advantage in military and defense sphere. They can impose their conditions. They can impose sanctions. They can prevent other countries from fully tapping into their potential, which causes a lopsided picture in the economy, in politics. It drives the buildup of tensions across the globe and acute conflicts, including the one in the Middle East that we've recently mentioned. But I'll spare you the gruesome details. You know the list full well. It's the Syria, Afghanistan, certain African countries are rife with problems. Which is exactly the ramification of this model. This is what I was talking about. So we need such a model of international interaction so that all the participants of the international system will feel as they are equitable members of it. We need a shared set of rules, not just a set of rules imposed by a single party, but a shared set of rules that is agreed upon by the international community. If we manage to create such a system, we'll succeed. It applies to international trade as well. When certain countries impose their will to others, when they will stop thwarting and stymieing the flow of investments, when they will close the opportunity to use certain currencies in transactions, then we will have greater equity and fairness. We will need at least try to seek to achieve this goal. If we succeed in this track, we will be able to create a more equitable, fair world and accomplish our goals. Thank you. Colleagues, next question, please.
Hi. Hello, and thank you, Mr. President. My name is Chris Kelly. I'm a fixed income investor at Invesco in New York, and we invest extensively in Russian government and corporate debt. You argued that U.S. policies undermine the dollar's status of the world's reserve currency, and in line with this, Russia has accelerated its de-dollarization drive. You have argued that U.S. policies have undermined the dollar. What do you see as the future of the global monetary system, and what role do you think Russia will play? Also, what are your thoughts on gold and cryptocurrencies as the old and new alternatives to fiat money?
Well, I don't think that I said that the US dollar has lost its standing as the global reserve currency. What I was saying is that it undermines it. The US policies currently is undermining it. It sort of ousts our own participation in it. I mean, we didn't want that to happen. Our major oil and gas companies, our majors and super majors, actually have their transactions in dollars, but we've been banned from using dollars in certain transactions when it comes to military-industrial complex, for instance. So if we are banned from this system, what do? We have to de-dollarize. Same applies for sanctions. Certain transactions in dollars, in US dollars, are impeded. So the US is effectively undermining its own toolkit, and I think that this de-dollarization drive can be seen across the globe. Even its share in the global reserves has been reducing to 5.9% or something like this. And then against this backdrop, yen, the Japanese yen share has grown. So it's a global trend. It's a natural thing. It's not because we are doing something or we're trying to push the things in a certain way. I mean, all the rest of the world is seeing what's going on, and they draw their own conclusions. That's the reason why we pivot to national currencies in our transactions with many countries. Take BRICS, for instance. It has its own basket of currencies. Same applies for SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The crucial thing here, the crucial thing for us is the volatility. We carefully look at the volatility of currencies. When we interact with our partners across CIS, the former Soviet constituent republics, the Commonwealth of Independent States, our goal is to decrease volatility, which is the reason why we opt for ruble, for Russian ruble and its use. The macroeconomic stability and the fundamentals are a major factor for us. And in general, we've been successful with it so far. We are fully cognizant of the limits and capabilities of Russian ruble. And yet, it has slowly gaining the status of a regional currency. In terms of the CIS transactions, for instance, it's quite a significant volume in our trade. Now, turning to gold and cryptocurrencies. Well, certain countries use cryptocurrencies, in others it is prohibited. I think China has prohibited it, has banned cryptocurrencies, and some others. It is unsecured, the risks are huge, it's very volatile, and I think we should listen carefully to the voices that caution us against the risks of its usage. Perhaps this is the future. We will be looking at the processes around the cryptocurrencies closely and make adjustments if necessary. Now, moving on to gold. I think the pivot away from gold and the gold equivalent was a global phenomenon. It happened naturally. I mean, the volume of global trade is larger than all the deposits of gold everywhere in the world. So I believe it would be quite impossible to peg it, to tie the trade to the gold back again. But again, the share of precious metals in our foreign exchange reserve is quite significant. So I think that the growth of reliability and of number of reserve currencies is a good thing. I know that United Arab Emirates are working on this idea, and several international institutions are active in the field as well. So I think we'll see more progress in this. So that would be our multi-pronged approach. We will not give up on the US dollar. If we will be banned from its usage, well, we will have to reduce. Mr. Kostin. Well, we are actually working on the crypto ruble, the digital ruble, together with the central bank. So what we are seeing right now, digital currencies are not just used for speculative deals. And there is certain rationale behind it, because in many cases it is used for in the gray sectors of economy. We have some time left, so colleagues, next question, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Dominic Loper-Ingram. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you on behalf of Fiera Capital, a Canadian-based global asset management company. I've been investing in Russian equities since 1994. I've seen many ups and many downs, and I've seen the impact of government policies, both positive and negative. So my question is, as we move forward, we've seen in recent months the Chinese government has taken major steps, resulting in greater oversight and control of many of its digital and online industries. Do you think such developments are appropriate, and are they necessary in Russia?
У Китая была довольно либеральная политика.
Well, let me put it this way. I think China was for a while quite liberal with regard to digital industries, which is only natural and reasonable given that those companies were only maturing. For a while, China created conditions that were accommodating and welcoming for companies, and they welcomed foreign presence. Now, the situation's different, and the socio-economic developments are ever faster, so China wants to exercise greater oversight and control over its national situation. But this is only natural. I mean, look at the United States, look at Europe. Aren't they doing the same or try to do the same? They do. The difference is the extent of such regulation and control. I don't want to go into the minutiae of the thing right now, but I think the crucial thing is to strike the right balance between the freedom of entrepreneurship and the interests and safety and security of its citizens, to prevent abuses on behalf of such platforms. Let me just say that I understand the rationale behind the steps made by China. As for Russia, we will look at the actual situation on the ground. Yes, certain regulation is welcome, but it shouldn't be a regulation that would act as fetters or as manacles for the industry. Colleagues, next question, please. President, we need to look carefully into all the matters related with the protection of personal data. This is the crux of the matter. This plus the use of anonymized big data. We will look into the best practices applied abroad. We will look into how other countries are doing, and we will fine-tune our own policies. Colleagues, we are stuck for time, so let's speed up.
Hello, Mr. President, and apologies for my technical difficulties. My name is Jeff Grills from Aegon Asset Management. First, I want to say thank you very much for taking the time to answer our questions. You've already commented on Russia's commitment to carbon neutrality by 2060. I wanted to ask if you could comment more specifically on your expectation for the development of new energy resources in Russia, such as hydrogen power. And additionally, what will be the impact to the corporate market from government regulations going forward to potentially align their goals of reducing their impact to the climate? Thank you very much.
I think I've mentioned hydrogen before, and I will reaffirm. Like I said, hydropower, nuclear power, and renewables account for 40% in our energy mix, and if you factor in natural gas, the figure would be 86%. Only 4 other countries globally can boast the same metrics. So in this regard, I think we are quite all right. But we need to think what's going to happen going forward. And we are looking into the green economy, the hydrogen economy. We have some high ground here. We have strong engineering and scientific traditions. We have the infrastructure, I mean the gas infrastructure that can be used for transporting and storing green hydrogen. So this is an advantage as well. Again, we are developing solar, we are developing wind power. And by the way, we do it in cooperation with our foreign partners on many occasions. The thing is, the energy transition that is much talked about must be smooth. It should not introduce such spikes and drastic swings of global energy markets as the one that we see today. It bodes nothing good for nobody. We see the drawdown of investments into hydrocarbons. Many companies divest from it. But what would this imply? Does it mean that we will be able to switch to wind and solar overnight and to... I know that it's not going to happen overnight. We have a roadmap. I know the milestones that we are setting for ourselves when we will be able to produce enough power from renewables to make the switch. But it takes a certain amount of capital investments, quite a significant ones. It takes changing the attitude of people, the primary consumers. And I've quoted this before according to the IEA, the International Energy Agency. They quote that in 20 to 30 years the energy mix will change, but ever so slightly. I mean, look at it this way. Developed countries, through their industrial development, have caused a certain buildup of emissions in the atmosphere. It were not the developing countries who caused this damage, this buildup, isn't it? And now, industrially developed companies, I beg your pardon, countries, want to dictate a new set of rules, which would effectively prevent the developing countries from ever reaching their level, that they will still drag in poverty. Do we want this? I don't think so. This is a fine line that we need to pursue. It takes trade-offs, it takes a certain give and take, because the threat of an unbalanced approach is clearly visible. As for hydrogen production, we will definitely develop it, hopefully together with our foreign partners. Colleagues, we are stuck for time. We can't take any more questions, but we queue them up first next year. I want to thank our charitable host. I want to thank all of you for your trust and confidence that you put in Russia, for your interest for our countries, and we will try to make sure that this confidence will be repaid. And if I didn't manage to take any other questions, I will be happy to answer them next year, on a matter of first priority, or on any other international fora, for instance at SPIV, the St. Petersburg International Economic Forum. Mr. President, thank you. Thank you, colleagues, and goodbye.